In this session we're going to take a look at ArchiCAD Start BIM Suite powered by ArchiCAD 16 Solo. My name's Ken Good from Graphisoft Connect. In this presentation we're going to look at a few topics. First of all, what is BIM? Then we're going to look a little bit about Graphisoft Connect, Graphisoft and ArchiCAD. Then we'll have a look at the ArchiCAD Interface. Then we'll look at a user example of the BIM project workflow. And then we'll look at the actual productivity tools included with the Start BIM Suite. First thing is, what is BIM? Well, really what we have to say is what BIM is not, and BIM is not a software product. BIM actually stands for three separate but linked protocols. The first term is Building Information Modeling, and this is the actual business process, the process of creating the database of intelligent information. There's then the actual building information model itself, and this is the electronic replica, the database that makes up the model. And then there's building information management, and this is the ongoing organisation and control of that data. So what does BIM mean in terms of ArchiCAD? ArchiCAD is a BIM authoring tool, and a term that Graphisoft have used long before BIM was ever invented as a term itself was the virtual building concept. And this effectively relates to this graphic here. It helps describe what we're actually talking about. So BIM as a protocol is made up of various different aspects that come together to create this electronic database of information. And as you can see here, there's various aspects that link together. Although we're looking at ArchiCAD 16 today, it's important to point out that the previous version, ArchiCAD 15, was the BIM Product of the Year 2011 in the Construction Computing Awards. And the key thing to bear in mind here is that ArchiCAD and Graphisoft strongly support the Open BIM concept. Open BIM enables us to exchange information with a wide variety of consultants and contractors using the IFC format. To explain a little bit more about IFCs, these are actually industry foundation classes, and effectively this is an ISO standard for BIM data. What IFCs allow us to do is take a typical model from ArchiCAD, such as this one, and then export using the IFC standards to various other disciplines to enable to interact and communicate with other users and other disciplines. This little graphic gives a little sample of some of the different types of software in the different fields that are available and have easy access to the IFC communication links. Just to describe a little bit about Graphisoft Connect, as a company we were established in Birmingham 1994. We've always been specialists in the whole implementation and services related to BIM, or in the old days, the virtual building concept. We now have 18 years experience in this field, and we did a little survey recently and established that we've introduced BIM to approximately 5,000 individuals, establishments, companies, schools, education facilities, etc. Head office is just south of Birmingham, and as you can probably gather from my accent, we also have regional representatives elsewhere in the country. And a mission statement of the company is to provide high-end, quality products and services required to accelerate your design experience. In this slide we're going to take a look at the global presence of ArchiCAD. So as a product, it's actually available in 102 countries and 25 different language versions. And in terms of platforms to operate on, you've got a choice of Mac or PC depending on what your preference happens to be. We'll take a quick look at the ArchiCAD interface now. This is a snapshot of ArchiCAD, pretty much out the box as it installs. I'm not going to go through every single feature and function on it here, but what I have done is call out some of the main areas. So the first thing I've pulled out is the toolbox itself, and this is what drives ArchiCAD. As you can see, it's an architectural tool, and the labels that the tools are given are broken down into fairly standard generic terms that are easy to understand, so things like walls, doors, windows, roofs, shells, etc. The main thing to point out with them is these are generic descriptions, so if you actually wanted to use a wall for some other component, there's no problem with that. If I was to model the desk I'm sitting at right now, for example, it has a timber top surface, it has 4 legs and there's 4 supports. So for that, what I'd probably do is use a slab tool for the top surface, some columns for the legs, and some beams for the supports. And we can describe in the database of information itself that this is not actually any sort of structural element, it is a piece of furniture. The next part of the toolbox is where we start to get some of the documentation information. As you can see, they're all grouped together in a fairly logical flow. The most important area on the screen is the actual drawing area, and here what I've done is pull out a little snapshot, and what I've got is a piece of wall that's selected, and it's just to highlight the fact that ArchiCAD gives you a load of information straight from the end of the mouse effectively, so that you don't have to go looking elsewhere. It's very much in front of your mouse, it's where you're looking, so you don't have to shuffle around elsewhere on screen. The next area I've pulled out is just the top part of the navigator here, and this shows the typical sort of workflow through ArchiCAD. So in the early stage, we're very much concentrating on the project map, where we're starting to put together the outline of the building, the floor-to-floor heights, the overall footprint, etc, etc. We then build up into the next area, which is the view map, where we start to coordinate some of our documentation and pull the views together. We then have what's called the layout book, which is where we then assemble these views onto pieces of paper, and then the final part of the process is Publisher, where we actually output the whole batches of documentation to various formats as required. This next shot just shows another example of the view map, and here we can see we've now got a structure in place that gives us various different organised plans, elevations, sections, 3D views, etc. So here we're going to take a look at an example of a project that's been worked through ArchiCAD by Mabers, and these are just some images that they've given us to demonstrate how the workflow actually progresses. So here we go from sketch design through to massing models, to cladding studies, to 3D cutaways to help with the visualization. 3D documents, these are a very useful feature in ArchiCAD because what they allow us to do is actually extract a 3D view to then overlay 2D documentation on top. So you can see there's details that have been blown up here, and these are quite useful because they can actually replace maybe 2, 3 or 4 individual 2D details to actually visualize a detail completely within its proper context. Then get some rendered images, some examples, and then we have the final scheme itself. So as you can see, it's progressed from start to finish inside ArchiCAD. So now take a look at the actual Start BIM Suite content itself. The first and most important part is ArchiCAD 16 Solo Edition. We're then going to look at the cloud-based BIM component database, quick look at the renovation workflow, talk about the energy evaluation tool, the MEP tools, the building explorer, MBS Link, and then there's Discover Smart BIM, which is a reference tutorial guide. So the first part of the content is ArchiCAD itself. In this case we're looking at ArchiCAD Solo Edition. There is also a Teamwork Edition, which offers more collaboration for multiple users on the same projects at the same time. But ArchiCAD in general is the BIM authoring tool, which allows us to create this database of information, analyse what information is there, share it with others, and keep all the relevant documentation coordinated. Next part to look at is a major new feature inside ArchiCAD 16 itself, and it's the BIM Components online cloud-based database. I've put a screenshot of it here, but the key things to point out is the fact this is a free membership site. You can access the site from anywhere on the planet effectively. Right now there's approximately 30,000 free parametric objects available online. It integrates fully with ArchiCAD, and it's available for all ArchiCAD 16 users. BIM Components can be accessed through any of the standard browsers. We'll take a quick look at it just now. As you can see, there's a number of items you can just look at individually and you can browse through. There's also categories you can look for in here as well, but what I'll do to begin with I think is just search for a desk. The results pop up any of the objects contain the keyword desk, and what we can do is just pick out the one that's most relevant, so maybe I'll go for this layout here. Once the page is loaded, we get a little bit of information about the object, when it was uploaded, what the license type is, etc. We can even rate it here. There's other options to look at the preview, the settings, etc. But this uses a GDL web plugin, which is the graphics language that Graphisoft used to create the objects. But what it enables us to do in this case is just spin around the object inside the web page to make sure it's the one that's most appropriate. We can also interact with the object itself. So here we have a preview, which is just a static image. We have a 2D symbol, and we also have the 3D object, which we can actually manipulate, spin it around, and make sure it is the most appropriate object we're looking for. There's also access to the settings. These are the same as you would see inside ArchiCAD, and what they allow us to do is maybe change the configuration. So let's go for a 4-desk rotated symbol, we can then look at the various other aspects of this particular object. Now these vary from object to object depending on what the feature and function of that particular object is. So clearly something like a houseplant will behave completely differently from a commercial desk layout, as this case here. But we can then examine the layouts, we can switch desks on and off, we can change what the extensions are. Maybe we'll have rounded on that side, we'll have rounded on this side, but leave cabinets on the others. We can play with the dimensions, the accessories, so maybe we change the chair type to high back. The armrest's already switched on, as we can see in the object here. We could change the type of legs. Let's have this one. We can change the desk cabinet to different configurations, different handles, change the number of drawers. We can change the partitions themselves if we want them to be visible. Can maybe add the extensions to the cabinets, change the materials and the setups here, set the minimal space requirements for space planning purposes, and then finally adjust what the 2D appearance of the object looks like. There's also a parameterized list available, and a further option for setting some of the 2D properties. So once we've chosen an object that we like and we're happy with, and I've just updated the settings to reflect the changes, once we've chosen this, we can actually download it directly into ArchiCAD. What I've done here is just reconfigure the screen slightly so that we can see ArchiCAD in the background, and this is actually a model of our office building. We can also see the website in the foreground. I've reduced this to the side so that I'm able to drag and drop between the two programs. The other thing I should point out is I'm running at a much reduced resolution for recording this, so I don't have the usual space I've got available, but all I'm going to do is just grab that, drag, and just drop inside this space somewhere. And you can see as I do that, the object becomes available. Clearly I'm going to have to do some more work inside ArchiCAD to actually tidy up and position this so it's not crashing through the walls, but effectively I've now transferred direct from the web into ArchiCAD itself. The final thing to point out with the BIM components is the fact that there are manufacturers and individuals and various other bodies contributing to the objects on here, so the content is continually changing and updating. The next part of the Start BIM Suite to look at is the Renovation Tool, and here what I've got is just a snapshot from a website that highlights the importance of the renovation and refurbishment market to the UK market in 2012. And what it highlights is that almost 50% of all the work carried out during 2012 is related to the refurbishment and renovation marketplace. Graphisoft introduced a new feature in the previous version called the Renovation Tool, which can help speed up any sort of renovation and refurbishment work. It's a very simple tool, and effectively what it allows us to do is take something like this existing plan and renovate it. So what I want to do in this case is remove the double door, actually remove a part of wall either side of it, create a rebated new structural wall, and then add a door into it. In a typical system that would require lots of separate layers to switch things on and off and show different representations. But in ArchiCAD it's actually controlled by 3 buttons and a number of filters that are customizable to your own preference. So in this case what we then do is look at the demolition plan, and you can see it's clearly highlighted what's changed. We then have the result after demolition, which doesn't show a lot other than a dirty big opening. We can then look at the new construction, and I've also opted to turn on the downtaking so that those are visible. And then we have the final plan status just off the screen. Same thing's visible in 3D, so there we have the existing, the demolition plan, after demolition, the new construction, and then the final proposed status. And the main thing, as I say, to point out is the fact that this is driven by 3 very simple buttons. We simply choose, is an element existing, is it going to be demolished, or is it a new element? And then there are filters available here that we can customize to create the various different types of document you require. What we'll do now is go back to ArchiCAD itself and have a look at the renovation workflow. This model is actually a model of our own office south of Birmingham, and the whole thing's been created inside ArchiCAD. So here we have the ground floor plan with the new desk layout, the first floor plan, the roof slopes, we have the various elevations, a couple of sections, and there are various 3D views. I'll go back to the ground floor, and what we'll do is use the Renovation Tool to modify the layout to make space for this new desk, because obviously that's the logical workflow for any sort of individual. If you buy a new desk that's too big, you make the building different to accommodate. To begin with, I'm just going to move it out of the way, and then what we'll do is look at modifying what's actually visible here. I will make life a little bit easier. As you can see, the building's not quite an L shape, it has an 80-point-something degree corner here, but I've just rotated around this base wall so that I have a nice flat level surface to work with. I'm going to switch on the renovation palette, and this is what drives the renovation function inside ArchiCAD. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 buttons. There's existing status elements, there are elements that are to be demolished, and then there's new status elements. And what I'll do is I've still got the desk selected to the side here. I'll make that new status, which means it disappears on this plan because we happen to be looking at the existing plan. So maybe what I should do is look at the demolition plan. So right now there's nothing to be demolished, but what we are doing is getting rid of all these desks, and what I'll do with them is switch them on to be demolished. Immediately upon doing that, you can see the colour of the objects changes, and I have a dashed line rather than a solid line, and they're physically highlighted. If I decide to do the same thing maybe with the window, you can see it also highlights in a similar way. But what I'm going to have to do is get a bit creative with the layout here to actually make things fit. So what we'll maybe begin with is also demolishing or getting rid of these elements here, this wall, and there'll be some other objects in a second as well. Bring a new wall across here. This new wall is going to be new status, and this section is also going to be demolished. At this stage, what I could probably do with doing is switching to look at the new construction, because this highlights the downtakings as well as the new build items. What I'll maybe also do is copy an existing element. So we're just going to move this backwards slightly. It's about here. This will become new status, and this original will be demolished. So we have a rough idea what this layout is going to look like. What I need now is the desk to come into place, and because I've taken away this window, what I can do is position this and line it up with the centre of the wall. We could do it with some other windows, so what I'll do is maybe just grab one of these, we'll go into the settings, and what we'll do is reduce the size so it's only 600 wide. I'll switch on my special snaps. That enables me to snap and count out the number of bricks so that I know when I place this window it goes into real brick sizes. I've mirrored a copy, and what I'll also do is set these to new status. So we can see again these highlight in different colours, etc. If we now look at the various different stages so we can see the end result, we start off looking at the existing layout. We can then see the demolition plan, which highlights all the downtakings. We can then look at what we're left with after the demolition, so not a lot in this particular case. When we then look at the new construction, we can see the new build wall elements coming in. I've left the structural downtakings because it's quite important to know where they are and to enable you to make the correct connections. But we can then see the final plan status and see the final layout of this particular building itself. What I'll maybe do to finish off is just come up here and grab this doorway and maybe replace this window to the front. So we will demolish this, and we'll place a double door in the outside face, the centre of the wall, and this is a new status element. So we can see again from existing layout to the final plan status. And while I'm also here, I'm going to select this door and take a look at some of the parametrics behind it. ArchiCAD's had parametric objects for all its life really, but what I wanted to do is look at how we can extend that functionality. So this dialog is going to show the standard features. Left hand side is all about using the library to be able to navigate and pick up an object, but once I've got it selected I'm concentrating on these settings here, so we can skip through and you see there's various aspects we can look at, from the general settings to the actual shape, the sizes of the frame, We can then look at the door types, the handle types. We can choose different ones. There's a list down here, and I'm actually going to go and create a custom panel in a second. We can then skip through and look at all these other aspects that allow us to fine-tune and control how this door's placed within a wall and how it behaves in the virtual building, or the BIM model in this case. The final part is where we can actually go and start to put in our various different aspects to enable us to produce a door schedule with detailed information. But what I want to do is change the appearance of this to something a little bit more customised. So I'm going to drop back to 2D, and I've actually got a door panel I've already set up. Now this right now is purely constructed with slab elements. So this is the door panel I want to create. It's got lots of different bits of coloured glass, it's got funny shaped mullions and transoms, has another little panel here, and it also has a stainless steel kick plate on both sides of the door. What I can do with it though is select this data and then choose to save it as a custom door leaf. So what I can do is give it a name, so I know exactly what this object is. Now that's saved, it will be available in the library. In the door leaf settings, I can actually switch and select custom panel, and this will list all the custom panels available. Now I've only created one so far, so that's the only one there is. I can then switch and have a look at the preview before I update the object, so I'm happy with that. And of course, if we're not happy with the result, we can always just move around slightly, grab the handle, open the door, and run away. The next part of the suite to discuss is the energy evaluation, which is built in to ArchiCAD 16. This is fully embedded in the system. It's designed for building designers. You don't have to be any sort of energy evaluation specialist to understand the results. It works natively inside ArchiCAD. It's very simple, sort of one click. Once you have the model you can analyse it, and it also exports to PHPP for further analysis in Passive House. Typical example of the setup is you take a building such as this one, you run an analysis on it, and it produces an energy balance evaluation sheet. This highlights various things such as the consumption, the operating costs per square metre per year, the CO2 emissions. Probably the most important part is the monthly energy balance down here, where we can see that there's various potential issues caused by solar gain, and there's a lot of natural ventilation where there's energy potentially wasted. So what we can do is then look at the systems in place, look at the design of the building, come up with an alternative scheme, and then we can re-evaluate it and see how the results are affected. So in this case you can see there's far more emphasis on renewable energy. We can then compare the results for the running costs, the CO2, and come up with a design that best fits the client's needs. The key thing here is this is built into ArchiCAD itself, so it doesn't have to go to any sort of external assessor to analyse. It's available to the end user of ArchiCAD 16 at any time. Next part of the system is MEP Modeler if you're into HVAC and MEP systems. Again, this sits directly inside ArchiCAD. You can work in either 2D or 3D to create your systems. There is an inbuilt collision detection system between the MEP elements and the architecture elements, and there's also a link that allows you to import directly from AutoCAD or Revit MEP softwares. In terms of taking this data and issuing it to others to be able to communicate and explore it, we have the Building Explorer system, BIMX, and it writes the data out to completely standalone files, so you don't need any specialist software to run it. The files can be written for Windows or Mac, and even run on iPads, iPhones or iPod Touch, and later this year there will also be a version for Android systems. These examples here are just large scale city plans that are used for the coordination of rescue services, but the more traditional use is something like this, where we have a typical building which we then export and give to a client to be able to navigate, run around and have a look at. This last one here is an example of our office building again. It's set for monochrome finish. One of the things that some of our clients find useful when they're giving this to other people to present is to set the view of it so it's set for this monochrome view, so people don't worry too much about the colour of the carpets or the type of brick, and concentrate more on what the actual function of the building is and make sure it has doors on the ground floor, etc. In terms of documentation systems, we have an MBS Link for ArchiCAD, which links ArchiCAD to an MBS specification file. The workflow is very simple. You simply select a view in ArchiCAD. You can then select a component from within that view, choose then to label or annotate that particular element. Labels come with leader lines attached, annotations are text. That then activates the NBS annotator, which allows you to pick up a particular clause. You can then click the annotate button, and what it does in this case is attach a label to that element which you can then position. That is then physically linked to the MBS specifications, so any changes made later can be highlighted within ArchiCAD to make sure the revisions are kept up to date and managed. The one thing to point out is MBS Link relies on the MBS software and the annotator software, and that is only available for Windows, so the link only works on the Windows platform. The final part of the Start BIM Suite content is the book Discover Smart BIM, an interactive guide to ArchiCAD. This is a reference tutorial guide which is 19 chapters, there's over 300 colour illustrations in it. For each chapter there's a file at the start and the finish to enable you to go to any particular part to start from there. So if you wanted to look at the detailing part of it, for example, you could skip to chapter 14, there's a file you can open up. We also include the work environment and the object library you need to complete the exercises. So if you need any further information on ArchiCAD Start BIM Suite, feel free to contact us. Details are listed here. Thanks for your time.